Hi everyone, how are you? I can't believe I have to follow two musical and dance acts. That feels very unfair, but thanks so much for having me. I'm going to talk to you today about design for social impact. There's some really kind of grave statistics in our world. Nearly half of the world's population lives on less than €1.50 per day. More than 1 billion people in the world are illiterate. Another billion people in the world don't have access to safe drinking water. Every single day, nearly 30,000 children under the age of 5 die from very avoidable diseases. And actually, in the next 20 minutes, while I talk to you about design for social impact, about 420 children are going to pass away from very preventable poverty-related causes. So it sounds pretty grim, but in fact, the statistics are just getting better. Our world is improving year after year, and much of it is the result of very sort of innovative approaches to design and poverty alleviation. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of work to be done, and I would say that there's a sort of considerable progress, but an enormous opportunity for designers in the fight against global poverty. So what I'm hoping to talk to you today about is just that. But first, let me tell you a story about something called the play pump. So the play pump is actually considered to be a huge learning opportunity in the fight against global poverty. Some years ago, a group of designers had this wonderful idea to design a water pump via a merry-go-round for children, really trying to harness the power of children at play. Not sure if you're familiar with the merry-go-round concept, but essentially children run around in a circle pushing this instrument, and the designers hooked it up to a water storage facility and a water pump. So as the merry-go-round was turned, the children were essentially pumping water out of the earth and then moving the water up to the storage facility above. Looks quite innovative, no? Unfortunately, it's considered one of the biggest failures in international aid and international development. Really interesting design, really interesting concept, but actually a go-to example in our space of failed aid interventions, and a very costly one at that. So some interesting things about the play pump. They would require 27 hours of continuous motion per day in order to create the amount of water promised for each. Now, I am an economist, but I'm not great at math, and there's only 24 hours in a day. So if this thing has to work 27 hours in a day to produce the amount of water necessary for the local community, that doesn't quite work. In addition, the device cost about 4 times more than a regular water pump. So the water pumps that many villages in this community in Mozambique already had access to, they were much less expensive than this new, very innovative, playful play pump. And unfortunately, these pumps broke very frequently, and they were extremely difficult to maintain, especially considering they required engineers and specialists coming in from outside. Now, 2014, there are dozens and dozens of play pumps all across Mozambique in Africa that are idle, that are not used. And in fact, many of them have actually been torn down and replaced with the old installation water pumps. So many communities have actually decided to go back to the water pumps they originally had. So why did it fail? Obviously, there were some technological challenges to it, them being expensive to maintain and fix. But not everything was bad. I can't say that this technology is not a success. In some contexts, the play pump might actually work quite well. It might actually be the innovation that certain communities need. But in this particular case, in Mozambique, for the type of users that the designers were designing for, the designers made a really fatal error. And that's that they actually didn't take time to develop a deep understanding of the actual people they were trying to benefit. And they certainly didn't take a lot of time trying to understand the problem they were solving for, which was fairly efficient, low-cost access to safe drinking water. So I believe in innovation. I try and do innovative work in my day-to-day life. And innovation is extremely important to combat some of the extreme problems our world faces. But we need to be comfortable really testing ideas and solutions and determining if we should scale them or if we should put them to bed. And in this case, if the play pump had been tested with end users and the designers had actually gotten feedback from the people they were trying to solve for, they might have heard feedback that would have changed the design or changed the installation or changed how the pump was rolled out. But instead, they sort of designed in a silo, apart from their end users, and unfortunately designed something that was not used and not really accepted. So, failure and this idea of being allowed to fail, trying things, testing them, iterating, making improvements is really critical for innovative design. And even better if we employ what we call iterative design, which is this idea, the cyclic process of prototyping, testing, analyzing, refining, going back to the beginning and starting all over again. And the iterative design that I'm going to talk about in just a moment is really the opportunity for us to find the best innovative solutions to tackle some of the world's most complex problems, like access to safe drinking water. Last note on the play pumps, I think one of the most important things, especially in the international development community, is that we learn from our mistakes. We're not a community that's very comfortable admitting when we're wrong and trying to share when we've made mistakes and what we can learn from them. But in this case, actually, big kudos to both the funders and the designers who very publicly acknowledged that they had made a huge mistake with the design of this pump. Iterated the program, refocused the entire program, and actually prioritized installing more efficient, government-approved water technologies in schools. And also tried to support the development of fun elements like playgrounds and merry-go-rounds for children, but not connected to water pumping at all. Unfortunately, in our space, there are many examples of things like the play pump. There's many examples of innovations, technologies that have been designed and have failed. We don't talk about them very much, and it's unfortunate because we've spent millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars on improved technologies, on innovative program design, and had very little success. Even though the numbers continue to get better and poverty rates do continue to decline, we've spent so much money on things that were not tested and did not have the end user's involvement in the design and creation and deployment. We've really missed the mark. And I would argue, and this is the premise for most of my work, that what we've been missing is the very thing that we're trying to offer a benefit to. And that's really quite simply just human beings. And even more specific than that, we're missing really a deep empathy for human beings and their needs, their desires, their aspirations, their actual behaviors, their preferences. Oftentimes as foreign aid or international aid, development workers, or even designers, we just forget who we're designing for, and we certainly forget to involve the end users in the process of innovation design. And I suspect that a real passion for human empathy and user experience was probably not taken into consideration in the development of the play pump, unfortunately. So today I'm going to tell you about iterative design, design for social impact, and how I think we can use not just innovative design, but collaborative, empathy-led, human-centered design to help tackle some of the world's most complex problems. And if human-centered design is a new concept, let me just give you the Cliff's Notes version, which is, it really involves the investigation of social problems, analysis of knowledge, engagement of users, and prototyping or iterative solution generation. And at the heart is a real focus on actual users, achieved via interviews, observations, good old-fashioned listening, and really being in the community in the context for which you're designing, for which you're trying to come up with solutions. So I'm going to take you through a project that's very dear to my heart that I've been working on for the last 6 months. And what I'm showing you here is Mukuru Slum, which is in Nairobi, Kenya. It's right in the heart of the city. Nairobi is one of the most bustling cities in East Africa. Mukuru is one of the largest and sort of fastest growing slums in East Africa. you can see, and I'm not sure if you can distinguish what it is, but you can see in the foreground some cattle walking on the main road in one area of the slum. Those buildings towards the back of the picture are people's homes and also their businesses. And in the front of the photo, you see mostly just trash. And unfortunately, most of those plastic bags are actually filled with human feces. Poop. Shit. And they are flung once an individual in the slum goes to the bathroom in a plastic bag and ties the bag. They're flung in a heap. And there are lots of these heaps all over the slum. They're called open defecation areas. There are some solutions in the slum. These are latrines, or I'm not sure what another word for them is, just a hole in the ground where you would go to the bathroom. You do have a door and some walls around you for privacy, but they're quite old, they're quite dirty, hygiene's an issue. They're actually not very safe for women and children. There aren't locks on the doors, and at night they're quite dangerous, and women report, and especially children report being harassed or attacked in some cases. And we got involved recently with a new social enterprise, a company that is a profitable company trying to have a social impact in the Mukuru Slum called Fresh Life. Fresh Life is trying to change the face of sanitation in the Kenyan slums by developing and deploying Fresh Life toilets, FLTs they're called. There are these blue toilets behind that privacy screen. They are quite innovative in design, and I'll show you a picture of the inside in a moment. They're quite clean. There are certain standards that the toilets have to maintain in terms of hygiene and cleanliness so that they can maintain their Fresh Life brand. And in fact, these toilets were actually designed with the members of the Mukuru Slum. So they were actually co-designed with the people that were going to use them in the end. So what's interesting is that people like these toilets. They helped design these toilets. They added their voice to the design of the toilets. They included their preferences for colors, for certain features. On the inside door of a Fresh Life toilet is a little mirror so that women and men can check their hair or their makeup or just make sure that they're looking fresh. There's a hook because some of the women in the slum reported that they wanted to be able to hang their bag on the back of the door when they went to the bathroom. Really kind of logical, rational things that Fresh Life, the company, was able to give based on the feedback it got from its users. But unfortunately, you can't just put new, blue, pretty toilets in a slum and expect people to use them. So even though a lot of the members of the slum helped design these improved toilets and theoretically want to use them, they weren't using them regularly. So why, if the product is designed with them and for them, are people not using them? Well, we find that, and this is where the behavioral economist comes out, that there are some situational and contextual features that actually prevent people from following through on their intentions. Much like maybe some of us in the room have intentions to go to the gym, eat less candy, study more, party less, or maybe party more, study less, I don't know. There's often times where we don't follow through with our intentions. And it's not necessarily because we're making a concerted decision. They're just things come up in life. Things get in our way. And we found in our behavioral research with Fresh Life that the same was true for people in the slum in Kenya. That even though people intended to use these improved, clean, very new toilets, there were various reasons why they were not. So we took a human-centered and behavioral design approach to trying to figure out why people who said that they wanted to use these toilets weren't using the toilets. And what could we do to try and fix the problem? So, first thing we did, that's me in the green jeans, my rear end. The first thing we do is we get out into the field. So we do the same walk that the residents of Mukuru Slum walk. And what I'm walking through is where the train passes several times a day. But it's one of the open defecation areas where people will throw their plastic bags full of human feces. And this is a path that people have to walk every morning and every night on their way to work and on their way home from work. And you have to always be looking down at the ground so you avoid stepping on a plastic bag. Because if you step on a plastic bag that's full of poop, it explodes. And then you have poop all over your shoes. So what you find when you do the walk yourself as a foreigner, as someone who does not live in the slum, you're just staring at the ground constantly. And it's something that we wouldn't have known. It's an insight that we would not have generated had we ourselves not done the walk just like everyone in Mukuru does the walk. And so one of the things that we found was that the blue toilets, people weren't necessarily even noticing them as they were on their walk because they were so focused looking down on the ground. So one of our design challenges became, how do we make the toilet more visible, either theoretically or physically, so that people don't miss them on their way, so that they can use the toilet, they can be reminded that a toilet is there. Super interesting. So the lesson there for us is that a human-centered and behavioral design process allows us as designers to develop an understanding of users in their context. We wouldn't know these things if we stayed in our offices in New York or in other parts of Nairobi even. We have to actually get into the context and understand how people are living, what their daily practices look like, so that we can come up with insights that will matter for our design. So these are the toilets. This is a little boy, he's about 4 years old, who is an expert user of Fresh Life toilets. And we were very surprised to learn this because he's so young. And the toilets are a little bit complicated. It's the first toilet in Kenya that has 2 holes, one for urine and one for feces. All other toilets that are used, you can put urine and feces into the same hole. And so for a young boy to have learned how to use this toilet and actually really enjoy it, and he actually plays inside of the toilet, that's how clean it is. He often plays hide and go seek with his friends in the toilets. This was a huge learning for us that we wouldn't have understood had we not observed people's behaviors. So we spent many days just sitting at various Fresh Life toilets and other latrines and other toilet options in the slum. We did time-lapse videos, so we took hours and hours and hours of 1 second or 2 second interval photographs and put together time-lapse videos, just trying to see how are people using the toilets. We found that goats really love to go up and sniff the toilets because they smell interesting. We found that children love to play in them. We found that women love to congregate outside them and talk with their friends. Really interesting things that we wouldn't have noticed had we not actually spent many hours sitting and watching and observing these installations. And the same is true for the observations that we did at non-Fresh Life toilets, at the old latrines, at open defecation areas. And we were joking this morning in the workshop that I did that we were not observing people going to the bathroom. We are not in that private place that people have. Rather, we're looking at the toilets from an outside perspective. So this is the inside of the toilet. Again, this was the first toilet of its kind in Kenya. 2 holes, bright green and blue, a little bit different looking. The old latrines are just white tiled, plain. Their walls aren't blue, etc. But what was interesting in the design process for the toilets was that people actually were able to give their preferences for colors, for materials, the actual physical design. They had many people, I won't do it on stage now for fear that this is being recorded, but they actually measured how hundreds of people squat, because these are squat toilets. You have to squat over them. They actually measured the angles to understand the aerodynamics or the ergonomics, of how people squat, what the angles are, to make sure that the holes are positioned in the right place. So a lot of engineering goes into the design process as well. What's important to know is that we're not trying to change how people are going to the bathroom. People continue to squat. We're not changing their squatting preferences. Many people in the slum actually like to squat. It's what they're comfortable with. It's what they're used to. So we're not asking them to change how they go to the bathroom. We're trying to design a product that better meets their needs and how they actually behave. Really important point. I often get asked, do we do behavior change? And it's not so much behavior change, it's more changing products and services and experiences to match how people exist in their daily lives already. Probably the most important lesson from this project is the principle of iterative design and iterative prototyping and co-prototyping with your end users and iterative feedback. So what you see here is we had designed some what we call fresh testimonials. They're testimonials of people who use the toilets, lots of different types of personas. The one you're seeing here is a young man, kind of a macho guy who drives a motorbike as his business. And we actually went out into the community and we had people tell us, what does this represent to you? What kind of message are you getting from this communication material? What would you do differently? How would you tell the story of this motorbike driver? We do it in both one-on-one settings as well as small group conversations, but we try and go to where people are. So these are individuals that were just sitting outside of a restaurant one day in Mukuru. We're not bringing them into an office and holding a very formal focus group. We're trying to have informal, very rapid conversations with people to get their feedback. Another example. This is one of the female fresh testimonials that we designed. The idea is that we want to show people lots of different types of personas, men, women, children, older folks, so that anyone who doesn't use a Fresh Life toilet can sort of see and identify, oh, that person's kind of like me, maybe I should use a Fresh Life toilet. It's a real kind of like marketing branding approach. So again, a human-centered and behavioral design process uses an iterative cycle of prototyping, reviewing, testing to come up with the best solution for the specific context and the problem. So this is an example of, again, sort of rapid prototyping, iterative prototyping, but it's a slightly different point, which is that we really want users to participate as consultants to the design process, or as testers of the design elements that we're creating, or as reviewers, or ideally, and we try and do this whenever possible, although it's not always possible, as co-designers. We try not to design in an office or in a silo. We try and design with the end users. So this is an example of some men who were giving us feedback on one of the designs, really reviewing it. We were testing it on them. They were giving us feedback. And then we were doing very rapid iterations of that design element in the field and getting their feedback in real time. And then lastly, and probably the most important, so this is me again, it's a very Alex-centric presentation, sorry. I sat for hours upon hours trying to act like the operator of a Fresh Life toilet. And I spent hours and hours folding toilet paper in 4 quadrants and folding them up so that they were ready to give to users of the toilet. And it was only after spending many hours doing the job of an operator of the toilet that I could actually develop a very deep understanding and empathy for the end users. So I just want to close by saying that, as design students, and I don't often get to speak to design students, it's really a unique opportunity. I think you have this amazing ability to engage in what I would consider to be a multidisciplinary process, to take really like a participatory and human-centered approach in your work, and possibly affect real change in the world. And I, hope, especially the 25 or so students that I met this morning who showed amazing empathy for one another in our design workshop, I really hope that you guys accept the challenge and take on some of the big, meaty, complex problems that our world faces. Thanks so much.